You've probably heard the story that people leave church because of some single dramatic crisis of faith. But what if that story is mostly, well, wrong? Today, we're going to dig into the data and find out the real reasons people are walking away.
Right, so the story we always hear is pretty simple, right? Somebody has this one big moment of doubt and boom, they're gone. But, when researchers actually sit down and talk to thousands of people who've left, a totally different picture emerges. It's way more complex and honestly, it seems a lot more fixable. So let's get into it.
All right. First up is the most common reason people give, and it's also the most direct. They simply stop believing that the core claims of Christianity are actually true. And what's wild is how consistent this is, no matter who you ask. Just look at this. Pew Research found that almost half of the people who leave point to disbelief. PRI study, that number's even higher, at 67%. And when Lifeway focused just on young adults, it shot up to a massive 70%. The message here is pretty loud and clear. For most, this isn't just some small nagging doubt.
So what this really tells us is that for a huge number of people, this isn't about getting their feelings hurt or not liking the music. It's about running into hard questions, about science, the Bible, suffering, that their church just never really equipped them to answer. They just stopped trusting that the truth claims the whole thing is built on were solid.
Okay, let's shift gears to a second reason, and this one is growing, and it's growing fast. It's a kind of moral conflict over how churches are handling some very specific social issues.
And I mean, this trend is really accelerating. Look at these numbers from PRRI. In 2016, around 29% said that negative teachings on LGBTQ issues were a factor in them leaving. But by 2023, just 7 years later, that number jumped to 47%. And here's the really crucial part. This isn't just LGBTQ individuals. It's their friends, their families, their allies. All of them are also walking away over this.
For a lot of them, this just becomes the final straw. They feel like a church's official teachings have created a culture that's either harmful or exclusionary. So they aren't just reacting to words on a page. They're reacting to what those words actually look and feel like in the real world.
And this brings us to a really painful truth. For some people, it isn't an idea from the outside that pushes them away. The wound actually comes from inside the church itself.
Now this next number it's really sobering. A peer-reviewed study found that somewhere between 27 and 37%, that's more than a quarter of all adults in the US, say they've experienced some form of religious trauma. And we're not talking about minor disagreements. We're talking about experiences of spiritual abuse, of being controlled or shamed, that leave really deep scars.
Research from the Barna Group has spotted some of these recurring patterns, especially from what younger people are saying. They talk about churches that feel overprotective or just shallow, where you can't ask tough questions. They describe cultures that seem anti-science, or are just plain hostile if you express any doubt. The end result is a community that feels exclusive and just totally disconnected from their actual lives.
And that's really the key, isn't it? Before anyone ever gets into a deep theological debate, they first just get a feeling from the community. Is this place safe? Am I going to be judged? Can I be honest here? That cultural vibe, it often matters way more than the doctrine.
So we've hit on intellectual, moral, and cultural reasons for leaving. But the single most common way people leave the church is actually the least dramatic. It's the slow fade.
And this is the question that just might reframe this whole conversation. We all assume people make a firm, conscious choice to leave. But what if, for most people, it doesn't happen like that at all?
And here it is, the number that just changes everything. According to Lifeway research, a staggering 71%, that's almost 3/4, of young adults who left the church say it was completely unintentional. They didn't wake up one morning and decide, that's it, I'm done with my faith. It just kind of happened.
So what does that look like? Well, the process is pretty simple. Life gets busy. College, a new job, maybe you move to a new city. The connections you had to your old church community just start to get weaker. And after a while, not going to church just becomes the new normal. It's a gradual drift, not a sudden break.
And that leads us to maybe the single most important takeaway from all this. For most people, the main story isn't a crisis of faith, it's a crisis of connection. And that means the solution isn't just about having stronger arguments, it's about having stronger relationships. So strong that somebody actually notices when you start to disappear.
So let's just recap. The myth is that leaving church is this one big dramatic event. But the reality, what the data shows us, is that for most people, it's a slow, gradual fade, often mixed with some of those intellectual, moral, or cultural issues we talked about.
We've seen the numbers, and we've walked through the 4 main roads that lead people away from church. So that brings us to the question that really matters.
Because those churches, they do exist. And the data on what makes them work is just as clear as the data on why people leave. And that is exactly where we're going next time, as we check out the surprising strategies of the churches that are actually growing.